Welcome to the Leadership Matters podcast, hosted by me, Steve Parker. This is a series that brings a fresh perspective to leadership, motivation and how to succeed by talking to a diverse range of CEOs, business managers and world-class talent. We also offer some personal tips to help you in your career. Each episode aims to provide a snapshot into the life and philosophy of some of Taiwan's most successful leaders, and to find out more about why leadership matters. We're very lucky today to have Zach Fraser in the studio. Zach is the Chief Operating Officer for HSBC Taiwan. He's had a 25-year career with HSBC. He's worked throughout Asia-Pacific region markets such as Australia, Hong Kong, Singapore, South Korea, Philippines, and lately Taiwan. During this time, he's had positions across a range of disciplines in HSBC's global banking and markets, wealth and personal banking, digital business services divisions. And Zach also sits on the board of governors of the British Chamber of Commerce. He's a member of the BCT Management Committee and is the co-chair of the UK Financial Services Committee. Zach, when do you have time to do anything else?
When I'm sleeping.
You've heard some of the podcasts, I think. You know kind of what we do. One of the things I think with big organizations, and you work in a big organization, is I kind of want to start off with the big question, which is this looking at, the future of work. Over 25 years of working with HSBC in banking, how do you see banking, but also the world of work itself, changing?
Really relevant question today, and I think I'm sure we'll get into the meat of that shortly as well. But really, has it been a big shift and away from sort of traditional workplaces where you go into an office, work 9 to 5, fixed seating, sort of come in, plug in, log in, do your work, and then leave for the day. That's certainly not the world we live in today. And it's not just something that's changing as well, even more so. Perhaps probably in the last 5 to 10 years, a lot of big companies like HSBC, others, have focused a lot on staff well-being. And that comes with that is this work-life balance concept, which we've certainly embraced significantly. And this has become very pronounced, actually, in more recent times when, you have to sort of look at, how do you protect your workforce from the pandemic, which we're experiencing at the moment. But, with that, it's not just about how an organization evolves or adapts to those to these needs for well-being. Is that how do you adopt your business models to your customers to do that also? But also, what do your regulators think of that? What does the wider environment think of that? And has regulations changing to enable that to work? Particularly, and talking more specifically to what we do, information security risk. You have people working remotely, they're on their laptops, perhaps working at home. How do you ensure that what they're continuing to work in a secure environment? So these are sort of things that we've had to do to evolve into that. But certainly, there is a very, very significant shift, and certainly for traditional companies like HSBC that started very fixed and in that traditional sort of work styles, to what you see now with like a Google or Amazon, you see on the TV. How they've got these sort of very flexible hybrid working environments. The world is definitely shifting in that direction.
So how do you take a group of people from somewhere where maybe they've been comfortable for a long time? I mean, what are the steps you take to get people or an organization from where it was to where it needs to be?
Yeah, that's another really good question. So and you have to sort of look and understand what people's personal lives are like as well. What's their living environment, right? So when you look at place like Hong Kong, you start talking about having people work in hybrid working environments, and it's probably not just Hong Kong, but Asia in general. Many people live with their extended family in quite small places, so they really don't want to work from home, to be honest with you, or have very limited time spent working in sort of a home environment or a remote environment. So it's much more difficult to convince people in those situations that's what they need, they should be looking to do, and we certainly don't want to force them to do that either. I think we have to strike the right balance there. But there is the adoption of sort of this called the future of work principles has been much easier with the younger generation. It's the older generation, and I'll classify myself in that for now, for the purposes of the chat today, where that's been a bit harder to convince people because they've had a career over spanning 20, 30 plus years where they've operated in a certain way, a certain modality, which is, coming to the office, I see my team, I know what they're doing, they clock off, I go home, they go home.
This idea of visibility is a big one. It seems a theme that's run through a lot of the conversations I've had in this studio have been about fear of what my people are doing. Like, if I can't see them, how do I know that they're actually doing something?
Yeah, look, and one of the things that I've certainly tried to bring to the business here, and I think many of my colleagues around HSBC in the region have done the same, is if you don't trust your employee to work at home and do their work diligently and be productive, why did you employ them, right? If you can't trust them, you're not supervising your staff members when they're off talking to customers and selling, in some instances, very complex products. So you're not supervising them there, but you trust them to do that. So why is it when someone's sitting at home and working in a home environment that all of a sudden you don't trust them anymore? That for me doesn't make sense. It's taking people over that line and convincing them that that their same trust sort of platform you have should remain unchanged. But equally, what we are finding, let's move move along on this concept of the hybrid working environment. People are actually highly productive. We're finding people to be highly productive. Now, this is not in a situation where they're working from home 5 days a week during a pandemic, but when they're sort of 3 days in the office, 2 days from home, or 4 days in the office, 1 day at home, let's sort of look at those sorts of ratios. The time that people are spending at home, they're taking their kids to school or picking them up from school when, like, I'll speak for myself. I worked from home yesterday and I pick up my daughter from school about once a month, and that was yesterday. And just the look on her face, picking her up. So that was 1 hour out of my day, which I don't get normally. I go home and I'm happy. My daughter's happy. And then you go back into your work and complete whatever you need to do for the rest of the day, be it a call or a task or a report. It could be anything. Your frame of mind is in a very positive place. So therefore, you're gonna do what you're doing much better. Right? The outcome's going to be far more enriched because of that situation.
Zach, we've talked a lot about the future of work, but I want to talk a little bit about you, and because how does someone go from being a trumpet player? I'm not dismissing trumpet playing, right? But it's not exactly the kind of beginning point you would imagine for a global banker of your level.
But I remember that conversation. I remember seeing the looks on people's faces, and recently connected with one of my old trumpet teachers actually, and described it as the accidental career. It was, so you're starting out and sort of finishing off through high school. I was spending an extraordinary amount of time studying music and playing trumpet and doing all the theoretical elements of that, going through the various examinations, doing the recitals, the concerts, the orchestral work, band work.
So this was going to be your career, possibly?
Well, it certainly was something that I was prioritizing, and even up until the point to which I joined HSBC as an 18-year-old, it was still there, and I couldn't really tell you what the tipping point is here as to when one sort of dropped and the other one rose. But it became pretty definitive when, at the time, which I was offered a role in Hong Kong. To leave Australia for the first time and work in Hong Kong was pretty clear by that point that things had moved on.
It's the allure of travel, right? Yeah. What you imagined music might have given to you, suddenly realised the bank was going to...
A different kind of romance, right? But there's the interesting... to be honest, there are no regrets here with this. When you do reflect back on these things, is that I was competent at that. I was never going to be great at that. I'm a very structured person by nature anyway, and I think a lot of the structured environment that I got from being in a more corporate sort of role was probably spoke a lot to me. I think being in the music space, and watching a lot of my friends evolve through that process. I still have many friends, some of them very, very successful in their music careers, but they spent a lot of time many of them in very unstructured environments, searching for the next thing to do, and trying to sort of establish themselves in that space. Now, and that can be very unforgiving. Right? Look, and anywhere can be very unforgiving, but there's something to be said about how it's called artists in general. Yeah, it's a very unstructured environment, or can be until you become established.
I think the thing with the creative arts is it should be structured. There is a kind of a process that people should follow necessarily, but not. I think often people who are drawn to the creative arts initially are drawn to the creation side of it. But if you're going to be successful and make a living out of anything, you have to have a structure, a plan, a process, marketing, sales, all of these kinds of things.
Well, moving from completing some studies at a conservatorium somewhere and then leaping into a principal or second or third trumpet position in a leading orchestra is a big jump. And from point A to point B there is a lot in between where there is very little structure.
I think being aware of who you are and what you want out of your life and what you want to do, I think is a massive step, which I'm 55 now. I really still have no idea who I am and what I want to be.
I agree. I still I'm like, what do I want to do? What do I want to do when I want to grow up? I'm still at that phase, right?
And trust me, almost everyone who's in this room has the same. These are powerful, successful people like yourself, and all of them, almost to a T, are still thinking about what they want to be when they grow up.
Yeah, maybe that's a professional golf when you retire or something. But I think you're saying that point of self-awareness. For most people, I was quite young when this was all happening. Anyway, like I was, still trying to get myself out of my teens in one piece and into my 20s, and it's a reflective point. It's when you reflect back that you realise that you just naturally went on that journey. So sort of destiny sort of takes you that way, and to me, it was the right thing to do.
This idea of a string connecting. I've often said, people come to me and go, my CV, I don't understand my CV. And I go, you're looking at it from the wrong direction. You've got to look at it from the top backwards and then work out why you got to where you are now.
Yeah, even sometimes when people's CV, there's the mistake in the middle, right? And people go, well, I didn't really want to do that. But they learned something from it because they moved on. Yeah. You're right. There's always something that's connecting the dots together as people move on.
This idea, so employing people, I think, is very interesting. You talked about the blips, right? The mistakes in the middle of things. When I'm employing people, I often look at how they respond to the blip, things that you look for in the way people respond in interviews.
Oh yeah, well, that's you often interviews are interesting. And you can tend to find, I certainly tend to find that people try to over-explain these sort of consequential decisions on their CV, right? Try to explain it or justify it. Everyone's got a different style. Everyone's got different interview styles and what they want to get out of it. Some are very structured, very role play orientated. Some just want to have a chat and say, like, can we get along? Do we have chemistry? I fall more into the second category, right? But when you start to, you look through people's CVs and you see something which is a bit of an outlier role, and you say, so what happened there? And my preference is when that's there, and as we've talked about, it's the blip, so to speak. For people to say, hey, look, I made a wrong decision, but I learnt from it, and this is what led me over here. And that's
and let it go. Move on.
Yeah, exactly. I think you've got to take the pros and cons of everything, right? In everyone's roles, I very rarely do you see someone say that 100% of their day is perfection. But it's not perfection. What are you learning from it? What are you taking from that in terms of how you evolve and develop yourself? So that's what I like to hear from someone, especially when we're hiring people, is what are you learning from, call it mistakes or just, that's not really a mistake. Sometimes you went in with something with a certain expectation and didn't turn out that way. That's okay. What did you learn from it, right? Then they had an interview with the initial hiring manager. What went wrong in that interaction that expectations weren't aligned? and then what you took forward from that. I think that's what's important.
Nice. I know that for you, physical fitness is also very important. Do you find that would the absence of exercise affect the way you work, or how deeply ingrained is this in kind of your whole work ethos?
So I'll go to the first question first. Is that I'm probably in the gym 4 days of 5 work days a week of the week and the one day that I'm not in the gym, which is usually a rest day, because getting old now and need to make sure that my body gets rest. That day is quite visibly lethargic compared to that of the other 4 days. I tend to find I'm slower out of the gate, so to speak. What you get from let's step back from being in a work environment. There's the saying, healthy body, healthy mind. What they say, you read up in any literature, if someone's got depression or got any sort of, mental incapacity of some kind, the first medicine anyone always speaks to is, what's your physical condition like? Are you in physical shape? Are you eating the right food? Are you? I
don't work out like you do, but I walk to work every day. And it's a 30-minute walk, and I get there, I'm awake, I feel good.
Let's bring that back into the well-being parts of employment, right? Of your staff as well. So we actively encourage this, but we did a lot of this during the pandemic. So we actually ran fitness competitions, but as teams, where you would log in scores, centrally, and then you would sort of have the teams, the leaderboards being circulated on a day or weekly basis. As an executive team, we would take photos of ourselves. So when I was working from home, I was moving a barbell, which looked kind of strange for most people, but other people were doing dance, like Zumba stuff, or dance, or people running on treadmills, and it really is a sense of camaraderie that comes with that as well. Because all of a sudden you've got accountability to a team, and I think largely when it comes to the health and fitness elements, and the same with work as well, is are you accountable to the person sitting beside you, as a team, and do you have a shared sense of purpose and objective? And I think you get that in the work environment, you get that in health and fitness, and those two things can come together.
Nice. I like this idea of this shared accountability. I think is a really nice thing, and that's a common direction has to have shared accountability, or else it isn't a common direction.
Yeah, so let's call it the North Star. Everyone has to know where they're going. That should be aligned with the company's purpose and values, the strategy, which HSBC, speaking for my own organisation, where earlier last year we very clearly defined this, or redefined it in some circumstances, and then obviously having people aligned with that in that direction as well. So really sort of good communication, sort of filtering down through the organisation to every single person in every corner. So to create that, again, shared sense of purpose and accountability.
I guess this is why a lot of companies value team sports as a kind of as a background for people to getting involved in the company. They see these things on CVs and go, okay, team sports, they've worked with a group of people to do something. Or university groups or activities, or all these kinds of clubs and stuff.
Well, you never see team building exercises being mathematics in a room, right? It's always going outside and running around, climbing things, or so on. There's a reason for that, right? And I think that it takes people out of that environment into something different, and it tends to be something that relies more upon teamwork. That's not a result of KPIs in a working environment.
How do you? This is kind of my last question for you today. Is how important is learning and development for leading a successful organisation?
Incredibly important. I think the investment in learning and development is largely understated in many places, and I think there's always room for more. Now, let's go back to what we were talking earlier about the kind of people interviews and when you're employing people. So, like personally, and I know for many of my colleagues, we want people that are curious, right, and want to continue to develop and evolve, and that's got to be done in a combination of their role and what they're doing in their job, but versus what you then bring across the table to enhance outside their set of tasks on a particular day. What things you can introduce to that, what programs you can bring in that enhance, perhaps it could be technical skills, could be leadership development, And they could be multidisciplinary as well. Like, so you say today you work in corporate banking, but you want to learn something about retail banking. Your on-the-job skills not going to give you that. But when you go and you have these other learning and development programs, you can expand that. And then all of a sudden you become a leader that can be more transitional between roles in the organization, bringing more value to an organization as well. And let's not forget the fact that people get a lot of satisfaction out of learning things and seeing outcomes of that, being able to play back their learnings, new learnings in the environments in which they're operating in. We see that quite regularly. So for HSBC, and if I probably extend this thought process further, we've done a lot around developing what we call HSBC University. A lot of investment has gone into that, where we've been loading in programs, to an online platform. But let's not disregard the fact that online learning can become very bland, okay? And people will find can find a very unstimulating environment.
This is the same thing that's happened with interviewing, with presentations, with training. What often happens, I've found, is that people log on. If something is ongoing, for instance, if someone's delivering a presentation or a speech online, often people will log on. You have 200 people, 300 people logged on. Yeah. But how many of those people are actually interacting? Digital learning is a little bit different. I mean, you have to actually engage with it. But I do agree with you. I think the digital learning in some cases can be less engaging than the direct face-to-face. I'm interested to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, well, look, that's, we've actually got a really good example as to how we find a way around that. And so with these, I go back to, I used HSBC University as an example, but we've also gone into a lot of collaboration work with reputable universities. I mentioned Stanford before. So we've actually done some work around our innovation programs offered through HSBC University in collaboration with the D School at Stanford University. People instantly engage to that. There's the brand association that comes with, I'm going to have a certificate out of this that comes from Stanford University. And so we've found a lot of success in these sort of collaborations with third parties like Stanford in the delivery of our programs. And they're not just reading off a page or just involving sort of short clips of senior managers saying things about things. So yeah, I think that's the future of the online platforms, is these collaborations where you can partner up with the right third party, a university or a professional services company that can invigorate or provide more dynamic ways of delivering online platforms. You'll get better engagement from it.
So I want to sum up just a little bit what we've talked about today. We've talked over a wide-ranging area, and it's been very interesting talking to you today, Zach. But the couple of takeaways I've got from this, I've got this idea of shared accountability, building a company that is working in the same direction. There are some obvious elements to that. This idea of personally being aware of who you are, learning, lifelong learning, whether it be a company such as yours that gives the opportunity to do that, or it's you personally reaching out and wanting to learn things to make yourself better at what you do, or just personally. This idea of a company building an environment that encourages retention by offering, you talked about learning programs, but also giving people pride in who they are by giving them rewards, building teams, building accomplishment, all of these sorts of things. These to me seem like a very nice roadmap for leadership, and I really appreciate you sharing all of these things with us today.
Cool, thanks Stephen, and we'll see you next time.
You could listen to this podcast on the fourth Monday of every month and on the ICRT website, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Just search for Leadership Matters by Stephen Parker. You can also check out my social media. I'm on Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. We'll see you next time.